Hey guys, so in this first review video, we're going to be talking about properties in numbers. And first, we're going to define some terms that might help us out. So the first term is a rational number. A rational number is a number that can be expressed as a fraction. So 1/6, 2/3, anything with repeating decimals or a whole number. The next term is an irrational number. An irrational number is a random decimal sequence. So if you plug a number into your calculator and there's no repetition with the decimals, you know it's irrational. The next term we're going to do is a whole number. Now, a whole number has no decimals after it, and it must be positive. So it has to be 0 on. It can't be negative. And lastly, an integer. An integer is a whole number, but this one can be positive or negative. So it has no decimal, but it can be positive or negative when you're looking at it. So now we're going to go through some examples. So number 2 on your pretest says, what is the negative square root of 36 classified as? So first we're going to solve it. So we're going to drop down this negative sign and then take the square root of 36, which is 6. So our answer ends up being -6. Now we're going to go through a checklist just to see what it's classified as. So, is it a rational number? Is it an integer or a simple fraction? Yes, it's an integer. So we're going to check that off. Next, is it irrational? When you plug it into your calculator, do you see a random sequence of decimals? No, so we can cross that out. Now, is it a whole number? Now, this one's tricky. It's not a whole number because remember, we said a whole number is 0 on, or the positive direction. So since it's negative, it can't be a whole number. Lastly, is it an integer? Yes, it's an integer because an integer is a whole number. So we have the whole number -6, and it can be positive or negative. So since it can be positive or negative, we know it's an integer. So we know -6 is rational and an integer. So in problem number 3, we're trying to figure out the square root of 23, what it's classified as. And when you plug it into your calculator, you get a really long number, 4.7958315523. So we're going to do the same process. We're going to go through a checklist and see what we can find out. So the first step, is it rational? Is it a whole number or a simple fraction? No, so we're going to cross that off. Is it irrational? Is there a random sequence of decimals after the whole number? Yes, because there's no repetition within these numbers after the decimal point. So if there's no repetition, we know it's irrational. And integer and whole kind of go together on this one. So is it an integer? Is it a whole number? No. So we can cross that off. And then whole number, is it after 0 in the positive direction and also whole? So it's after 0 in the positive direction, but since it's not a whole number, there's decimals after it, we have to cross that off. So we know that the square root of 23 is only irrational. So now we're going to move on to properties, and we're going to start with the distributive property. So the distributive property is multiplying a term by 2 or more terms in parentheses. So for example, we have 3 times 2 plus 5. So we're going to take 3 and we're going to distribute it to both these. And that's the same as saying 3 times 2 plus 3 times 5. So in the additive property, if you add 0 to a number, it's not going to change the value of the number or the outcome. So if you have 8 times 9 plus 0, it's going to be the same as 8 plus 9 because this 0 isn't changing anything in the problem. For the commutative property, if you change the order of the numbers, you still get the same outcome. Now make sure you're looking because this only works for addition or multiplication. So in the addition example, if we have 4 plus 8, that's going to be the same as switching the order to 8 plus 4. You're still going to get 12 for both answers. And in multiplication, if we have 3 times 4, it's going to be the same as 4 times 3. The order doesn't matter. You're still going to get 12 and 12. Lastly is associative property. If you were to change the order of the numbers with parentheses, you'll still get the same outcome. Now again, this only works for addition or multiplication as well. So in the first example, 13 plus 6 plus 4, we're going to use PEMDAS, so we're going to use parentheses first. So 6 plus 4 is 10. And then you're going to add the 13, and you end up getting 23. Now on the other side, if I were to switch the parentheses, I would do 13 plus 6 first, which is 19, plus 4, and again, I get 23, so it's the same thing. Now in multiplication, same thing applies. PEMDAS first, so parentheses, 3 times 4 is 12, times 2, and you get 24. There we go. And on this side, parentheses first, 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 4 is also 24.